There we go. All right, so we're going to just start to lay up the clay, and here is proof positive of what I'm saying about, there we go, all right, about the head living inside a square. Here's a little skull, right? So, we'll do a little bit of anatomy in a bit, but for now we're just worried about proportions. Here's the skull. Okay, you can see it's about as deep as it is tall, right? Fits my hand, okay? And that it's narrower, right? From the front. So you also notice, right, jawbone, about half of the way back, okay? Look at this though. This is called the parietal lobe. Look how the tallest point of the skull is behind the jaw, right? Jaw's halfway. Tallest point of the skull is behind that. This is also the widest point of the skull, the parietal lobe, because what you'll notice is the skull, it looks like an egg. Okay, so the widest and tallest points are behind half, and that's important as we start to add clay. What we're going to do, so I'm going to make it this way, face to the right. What we're going to do is start building our clay on. And what I'm going to do is just take chunks of my clay and start to attach it to that armature. I'm not going to work it in or press it. What I want to do is build mass, right, out quickly and loosely. And we do that for a couple reasons. One, because I'm teaching you how to do what's called modeling, right, which is a specific form of making, as opposed to like banging sticks together, right? Modeling is when we add and subtract to create something usually based in life, like looking at a reference. Right? So what I want to do is I want to use the thickness, the width, right, of my armature to start to create the side profile of my portrait head. And what I'm really worried about right now isn't so much features. Like, I'm not going to add the nose, I'm not going to add the eyes right now. I'm not going to add anything other than the kind of general profile of the skull. We're going to be working really general to specific, right? So think of it like 8-bit, 16-bit, right? It's like Space Invaders, and then it's like Mario Brothers, and then it's like whatever. What comes next? Mario Kart. So right now we're like in Space Invaders town. The other reason we build nice and big and loose with these chunks is if I start to like just put clay on like that and really work it in, I'm just compacting air into the clay. And that's going to pop, right? So here's the deal. I'm envisioning, like, let's say I want my parietal lobe to be right there, right here in space. I'm going to stick that clay on and just push it down to that level and leave it. And then I know that my next piece of clay goes that high, and I'm going to leave it. Maybe just whip the little edges together like that to make it stick. But I'm not going to work it in, right? I'm not going to work it in. So I'll have the skull as a reference for you to build this. And essentially I'm just creating a mohawk or a kind of like profile contour of like a robot skull that's as wide as is deep. Okay? And once I get to a certain level and I build out to that contour, right, the lighting's not the best, but you can start to see that there's a facial plane forming. I still need more chin on there. Right? There's a facial plane forming here. This is rising to the parietal lobe. This is starting to drop back and around. And this is called the occipital lobe back here. So I'm just starting to build out to that general contour. Okay? Where we're probably going to get today is we'll have the clay masked up. But our first job is to get this general contour on them. Okay? I want you to keep a bag nearby because anytime you stop working, throw the bag on there. We want to keep this process is going to take us the next 2 weeks, right? So we need to not forget to keep this quite hydrated. So this is next phase. You can always open the code and check my piece for reference. But I'm just going to start to work the general contour, lateral contour of the skull, right? So I generally want to start thinking about this shape, that shape, right? And getting it on here. So we've got the lateral contour in place, right? Now we're going to work on the frontal contour. And so this width is what we're after right now, right? This width, we're going to make this width of the egg. So essentially we're going to design, we're going to take our mohawk, our like strip of contour that we made, and then we're going to add another strip of contour along that widest part of the egg. And then we're going to use that to fill in, start to fill in the back of the skull. And then I'll stop there, and then the last thing we'll do today, that I'll demo on a little bit, is how we start to fill in the front quadrant, right? So essentially we create a contour across, and then start to shape in the quadrants, okay? So, here we go with that. So this is my face, right? This is my parietal lobe, which is the tallest part. That's it tells me where that egg is. It's a little bit back of half. I'm going to take some clay, and if this is my square of the head, I ask myself, how wide is it? Well, right now I'm going to shoot for 2/3 as wide, right? So about that wide overall. So I'm going to start my parietal lobe, and I'm going to just build out another strip that shows me a contour, right? Another strip that shows me a contour. This is the right side of the head, face is back here. Right? See how that works? And I'm going to check my skull. And I'm going to say, no, see how the skull is a little flatter towards the top, right? And mine is like drooping down. So I'm going to go ahead and add in that more forceful egg-likeness to it. And bring that right in. So I'm essentially developing that back part of the egg through that. I'm going to do that on both sides. Making space for my brain, essentially. And then I'm going to, before I do anything else, I'm going to check that width, right? So there's my two parietal stripes. Okay? Looks like elephant ears, kind of. And then I'm going to check that width. So here's my overall width. I can just use my hand. You can use a caliper. Tool. There's my overall width. So 2/3 of it, right, is about that wide, amazingly enough. So now I'm going to go around to the front. And I'm running a little bit wide. So I'm going to look at my skull again, and then I'm just going to use my knife to reshape that to get the curve I want, but make that curve just a little bit smaller. Okay. And if your knife doesn't cut like this, then I will show you how to fix it with the sander so that it does. So there it is, right? Beautiful. At this point, I want you to look at your armature, and I want you to draw a very vertical, straight line right in line with the armature. Okay? Down the front and back of your piece. Because what you notice is as we start to fill in the clay, sometimes our lines get a little to one side or the other, and we want to make sure we're keeping that mass of clay, our head, centered on the armature. So that line is going to help me visualize, how to stay in the loop. So last phase of this step is now I know between that, right, between this contour and this contour, I know where the back of the skull is. So I can start to very loosely put clay in there to fill up that void. And how I do that is the same. I just take my clay and I push it in and then bring it across. Right? Bring it across. So there, that little hole needs a little less clay. And I'll slowly just start to build in the clay to fill that as a nice curve. I am only putting in enough clay to fill the void. Right? If I overfill and I have to push more than maybe that much, then I'll cut that clay off because I do not want to compact it in. That's how I trap air bubbles. Right? So I'm just building out to the surface I want. Little holes get little pieces of clay. And I'm not going to worry about making it smooth. Please don't worry about making it smooth. We are a long way from making anything smooth. You only need it smooth enough to tell where your shape is, where your form is. Okay? As soon as you can tell where your form is, you can stop adding clay. Okay? If I somehow add too much on, then I'm not going to pack it in. I'm going to cut it off or pinch it off. Right? And I'm going to do this to both sides of my skull and just build in a nice. You notice I'm using the side of my thumb? I use this a lot. Your fingers are convex, like the back of a spoon, so if you do this, you scoop. There's not a lot of places on the human body that are actually concave. The bone on the side of my thumb is concave, so when I use it, I create a convex surface more like the body, right? So if you use the side of your thumb rather than your fingertips, you're going to have better results shaping with your hands. So we're going to do that. We're going to build out the back of the skull on both sides after we define our contour. Sound good? Great! Oh, look, my beard's ready. I'm going to edit that part out.